It was at 3 a.m. in March 2026 when everything went wrong on a quiet Tuesday night in Barcelona, Spain. No screams, no witnesses, just silence. But inside that silence, something unthinkable had already happened. And by the time anyone realized James Gracey was already missing, and it was already too late, because what investigators would soon uncover was far more disturbing than anyone imagined. So stay to the end of the video and get to know the psychological breakdown, investigation mistakes, and lastly, the lessons learned about the case. Today, we're diving into a case that will leave you questioning everything: trust, friendship, and the people you think you know best. This is the story of James Gracey and the terrifying truth behind what happened to him that night. James Gracey was 20 years old and was known as kind, quiet, hardworking, and cheerful towards others. He was from Elmhurst, Illinois, and a college student at the University of Alabama. To everyone around him, he seemed normal, safe, and predictable. But behind the scenes, there were signs of a hidden struggle no one had noticed until it was too late. He traveled to Barcelona, Spain, in March 2026, during a spring break visit to see a friend studying abroad. Then, on March 17th at exactly 3 a.m., something changed. Phone calls stopped being answered. Messages went unread. And the last known sighting of James would become the most important clue in the entire investigation. He was reported missing the next morning to the police, and immediately they took action on his whereabouts and the last location where he was last seen, which was Shoko nightclub. Hours later, the truth began to surface, and what they found was something they would never forget. But something felt off, because this kind of disappearance wasn't random, and the more they dug deeper, the darker the story became. Then came the moment no one expected. His wallet was found floating in the water, and it gave an indication for the police to make a new search location, which was at the beach where the wallet was found. The dive teams of the police department began their operations, and for 2 days the search went on, and the body was discovered at night, 500 feet away from the nightclub he visited and was last seen. But behind closed doors, another investigation search was still going on, because his phone was not with him at the bottom of the water where he was seen, and then a GPS location was conducted, and his phone was found with another person in an apartment. That alone changed everything about the case. The suspect was arrested immediately and taken in for questioning. Even after the arrest, it is still not clear on the cause of death of James, and the forensic teams are still checking everything that can link to his death. But the Barcelona police are calling this an accident, Death saying there is no indication of foul play in this case, but they are still investigating and still are waiting for autopsy results of James' death. There are still many unanswered questions in the death of James Gracey. Was his cause of death as a result of jealousy, anger, obsession, or something even worse? Because this wasn't just murder, it was calculated. In the end, justice was served by locating his body after days of being searched, and authorities still called it an accident. But not everyone believes that. Because of the missing phone, the unexplained movements and the silence surrounding that night still don't add up, and maybe they never will. So the question remains, was this truly an accident or something far more sinister and darker that we haven't been told yet? And how well do you really know the people around you? Because sometimes the real danger is already inside your life. Now let's dive into the psychological breakdown of the case. At first glance, the death of James Gracey looks like a tragic accident, a young man alone in a foreign city late at night. But when you really examine the behavior, something doesn't sit right. James Gracey was described as calm, structured, and responsible. Not reckless, not impulsive, not the type to simply vanish without a trace at 3 o'clock in the morning. So the question becomes, what changes a person's behavior drastically in a single night? Psychologically, there are only a few possibilities: influence, pressure, or fear. If James was with someone that night, someone he trusted, that trust could have made him lower his guard, And in true crime, that's often where the danger begins, because the most dangerous situations don't come from strangers. They come from people who already have access to you. Then there's the missing phone, found not with him, but in someone else's possession. That detail alone changes the psychology of the entire case, because in accidental deaths, phones don't usually separate from the victim and travel somewhere else intentionally. Now let's dive into the investigation mistakes of the case. Every investigation, no matter how experienced the officers are, there are always blind spots. And in this case, those blind spots may have mattered. The first critical issue was assumption. Early indications pointed toward an accident, a fall, or possible drowning. And once that idea takes hold, it can quietly shape every decision that follows. This is known as confirmation bias. Investigators begin looking for evidence that supports the theory, instead of challenging it. The second issue was time. Those first 24 hours are the most critical in any disappearance. And if there was any delay in treating this as suspicious, valuable evidence could have been lost or altered. Then there's the phone, a key piece of evidence found in someone else's possession, which raises a serious question. Was that lead followed aggressively enough? Because in cases like this, timing isn't just important, it's everything. Now lastly, let's dive into the lesson learned in the case. Cases like this leave behind more than just questions, they leave behind warnings. The first lesson is about trust. Not every threat looks dangerous. Not every risk feels obvious. And sometimes the people we feel safest around are the ones we should understand the most. The second lesson is awareness. Being in an unfamiliar place, especially at night, changes everything. Environment matters, timing matters, and who you're with matters even more. And finally, the most unsettling lesson of all. Not every case gets clear answers. Some remain suspended between possibilities, accident, or something far more deliberate. And until every detail is truly explained, the story of James Gracey remains unfinished. Because sometimes the truth isn't what's hidden in the dark, it's what was never fully brought to light. If the story touched you and you found this case interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment below. Because we are all families in this channel. We post crime videos always. Until next time, stay safe and vigilant.